the Talmud, or the oral tradition, as it is called in many cases, gets its authority in three different ways, and I'll try to summarize them quickly. The first is that much of what God told Moses over the course of 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai was not recorded in the written text that God gave him that we know of as the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses. A lot of it was just taught to Moses orally, and Moses was expected to teach it to his students, who were charged with transmitting it to their students, and so it went through the generation. Hence, it's called the oral tradition. So the Talmud seems to be espousing laws that aren't in the book, the written book of Torah, but that's because it's transmitting an oral tradition that traces its way back to Moses at Sinai. So that's number one. Number two, the Talmud does engage in quite a bit of exegesis, where they infer laws from particular passages in the Torah that don't necessarily seem to be saying that on the surface. Where does it get its authority to do that? The answer is, when you listen to an hour-long lecture and take notes, I could probably read those notes in about 5 minutes flat. But if I read it, I won't really get everything you got from listening to the lecture. I'll have to come to you and ask you and say, these 5 words, what are they code for? What's the background? And you'll need to tell me your coding system. That when you say algebra, you're referring to the following 3 lectures that we heard from our lecturer back in April. And now I understand the background, but all you wrote was algebra. If you say ocean, you're referring not just to a particular ocean, but you're referring to oceanographics, you're referring to the currents, you're referring to storms, but that's just one word and it's code. So when God gave Moses the written text, he embedded into that text much of the oral tradition that is later espoused by the Talmud. And I must add, the Talmud just documented it. It was taught by many generations of sages and teachers. Each one who was given the code, God gave Moses the code, and then Moses shared that code with his students, who shared it with their students. Hence, the Talmud engages in all these exercises in which they infer or derive one law from another, one teaching from a different passage, because they understand the code of hermeneutics, the code that tells you what each word means and how to read it, how to spell it out, what the background to each of these words might be. Finally, the third level of Talmudic authority comes from what we call rabbinic decree, where the rabbis are authorized in the book of Deuteronomy to legislate laws that are not part of the Torah law. They're not part of the biblical mandate. They are rabbinically mandated. But the Torah authorizes the Talmud, the Torah authorizes the sages to legislate new laws. The role of these new laws are often to protect the old. It's kind of like putting a fence around a swimming pool to make sure that no one falls into the pool. So when you have a particular prohibition and you want to make sure that no one ever comes close to transgressing it, you make 1 or 2 additional prohibitions to expand the prohibited area and make sure that no one ever comes close to transgressing the original law. The book of Deuteronomy authorizes the rabbis to legislate such laws. That's where they get the authority for this last and third segment of Talmudic law.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.